Humanity tends to fetishize the idea that it is diving headfirst into irreversible chaos, soon to be overtaken by the willing destruction of society, the onlooking of government, and the acceptance of blatant lies. This is undoubtedly why many people have taken a liking to George Orwell's novel 1984. Still, despite mass veneration, there are ardent debates over whether the ending is adequate and effective in concluding the story. The few critics that dislike the ending claim it is inconclusive, not providing significant closure and leaving the audience unsatisfied. However, that is mostly based on personal beliefs and unhappy sentiments. The purpose of this video essay is to demonstrate how suiting George Orwell's conclusion is in the story from a logical perspective, when one takes into consideration all of the information the reader was provided with throughout it. This will be done by analyzing the processes the party went through when dealing with traitors, the mechanisms that the party applied to society in order to remain in power indefinitely, and the purpose that George Orwell had for writing the novel in the first place. The first thing this video essay will address is how the party approached treachery. Since the beginning of the novel, it is mentioned that people who commit thought crime are horrifically tortured. It does not take him long to reach the conclusion that he will be executed or captured because of his misdeeds, noting in his notebook, "Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death." He recognizes that there is no escaping from the party now that he is a criminal. It is foreshadowed since the beginning that he will ultimately end in confinement, that nobody who has ever thought badly of the party is able to escape their grasp. And of course, it goes without saying that it would make no sense for Winston to be an exception, given the number of delinquents the party had caught in the past. Had developed for Winston to be able to simply get away with his crimes, but it was also stated many times throughout the book what will happen to Winston after being caught. This is thanks to O'Brien, who falsely portrayed a Goldstein supporter to gain the trust of Winston, and then was the man who overlooked his torture. He mentioned, "We are not interested in those stupid crimes you have committed. The thought is all we care about. We do not merely destroy our enemies, we change them." O'Brien is surprisingly conversational when discussing the procedures with Winston, going step by step on what he had done to other people and what he would do to Winston himself. And it is simple to see that he is sure the treatment will quote-unquote heal Winston, because it has worked so many times in the past. Not only is he sure, but actually provides examples referring back to Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, and stating how he took part in their interrogation and saw them gradually worn down, whimpering, groveling, weeping, and that there was nothing in them except sorrow for what they had done and love of Big Brother, that they begged to be shot quickly so that they could die while their minds were still clean. Again, readers are provided with an example about how effective the treatment was. The party made sure to completely change the thoughts of those that ever tried to betray them, even if they were going to execute them 1 week after their release. They used proven methods to break their rebellious subconsciousness, leaving but hollow shells of men, that the only thing they thought to be true was the sacrosanctity of Big Brother. Summing up, the Ministry of Love was in the book for a reason, and had dealt with cases like Winston many times in the past. His love for Julia or bitter hate towards the party only held him together for so long before he finally broke, and it was inevitable that he would. Yet another aspect that reinforces the idea that the ending is appropriate are the precautions that the party had taken when dealing with power in order to avoid failing like other totalitarian governments. O'Brien sums up the idea, stating, "We are different from all the oligarchies in the past in that we know what we're doing. All the others, even those who resemble ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. They pretended, perhaps even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just round the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power." The party had, essentially, created many safeguards in order to surpass other failing parties and societies. It had accepted that the only thing it pursued was power, a power that it would never allow to slip from their hands, and they did not shy away from this fact. The party had control of the power within and outside its territory. They were in a never-ending war, and they often highlighted the lack of resources to their population in order to give them a sense of need. With their power, they even had their main threat, the proles, under their hand, leaving them in a willing ignorance, depriving them of knowledge so they cannot know any better. By doing this, they are made powerless and therefore not able to create uprisings. This creates a metaphysical paradox, or in the thoughts of Winston, until they become conscious, they will never rebel, and until after they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious. This describes the futile predicament the proles find themselves in, needing consciousness for uprising and at the same time the latter for the former. This makes it impossible for anything to ever take place, seeing as the parties seem to be in total control of the information the proles received, easily rewriting details in their perceived reality and distracting them with war so they develop no unapproved ideologies. This displays yet another safeguard the party had applied to distinguish itself from ancient governments and remain in power endlessly. All of these features make the party an accomplished totalitarian government, and one that will never lose its power and remain controlling the population indefinitely. The lengths the party went through in order to keep vigil over its citizens is what truly made the book memorable for readers, seeing as it terrified people to believe that a government such as that could ever exist, and that was exactly what Orwell wanted to accomplish. It had been a lifelong goal of George Orwell to combat totalitarian beliefs and to convince people to become pro-democracy. 1984 was supposed to serve as a warning to other generations about the results of allowing governments to take over personal lives, and Orwell even mentioned in a letter his fears about the future of humanity. If the sort of world that I am afraid of arrives, a world of 2 or 3 great superstates which are unable to conquer one another, 2 and 2 could become 5 if the Führer wished it. That, so far as I can see, is the direction in which we are actually moving. He is openly worried about the direction humanity is moving towards, and, in the end, Orwell succeeded in transmitting this fear into the reader, thereby fulfilling his purpose for writing the book. It would have had a significantly lesser impact on the reader had Winston survived or, for whatever reason, had overcome the government. In the end, Winston had to be brainwashed, tortured, destroyed, to accurately display the dystopian society that Orwell had envisioned since he began thinking of the novel. Because when a reader sees the last words, 2 gin-scented tears trickled down to the sides of his nose. But it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. It truly feels as if the government will never lose control, that there will be this eternal party, and people will remain happily ignorant of the unhealthiness of it until their demise. There are, of course, counter-arguments to the belief that the ending is appropriate. People mention that the proletariat group would have rebelled because they can tell what's right from wrong, and that the love Winston had for Julia would obviously have been stronger than his fear of some pesky rats. However, both of these ideas are misguided, and their contradictions are in the book itself. The tough, hard-working old woman who had been placing clothes on the line for them to dry was supposed to represent the proletariat, day and night, living content with the propaganda that the party was feeding them, distracting themselves with work tirelessly because they did not know any better. The work ethic is admirable, as Winston noticed, but goes to show that the proles would never rise up. As for the rats, they simply demonstrate how much the party knew about the citizens. They knew so much about Winston that even if he had not betrayed Julia, he would have broken some other way because ultimately he was never at the advantage, seeing all the information the government had on him. In conclusion, because of all these factors, it is self-explanatory that there was only a microscopic possibility that the story would have ended any other way. The methods of the party, from how they treated thought criminals, to the precautions they took to remain in power, to the very reason this novel was written about to begin with, all point towards the ending being appropriate, exactly what Orwell envisioned, and what a dystopian society would truly have. Society today simultaneously fears and obsesses over this type of government. However, a totalitarian government such as the one in 1984 would never be accomplished in today's society, because, unlike the life of Winston in Orwell's novel, it is not probable that individual stories will be as poetically fitting.